Thank you. We're going to get our meeting started. I'm going to call the Finance Committee hearing to order at 6:03-ish. And this is going to be our final budget hearing. It'll be an overview from the administration, which will lead into the city council meeting tonight, which would be a potential vote for passage of our 2025 operating budget. As we move forward, we've had multiple meetings where we've had the different departments present our different budgets per their department. We had the first meeting started off with Mr. Mazer giving an overview of our budget, and we're going to finish with kind of a circling back and going through what we have learned over the last couple of weeks. If there's any questions from the audience, from the public participation, we'll ask you at the end of the meeting. At the end of Mr. Mazer's presentation, we'll ask council if you have any questions to the administration or any department, and we'll have a final discussion on the budget, and then we'll close the meeting and head right into our city council meeting at that point. So to start the meeting, I'd like to give the mic to Mr. Mazer, and he can start his presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've been through all the presentations. We said we'd come back with the list of items that were removed from the budget, but also in front of you, we put together a memo describing some of the changes that have been made based on some of the comments. Now, one of the items, you'll see that first bullet point, we did add to the police personnel budget. This is due to the hiring of new police officers, and what we had anticipated originally was that they were going to be hired in at step one. But what this added amount accounts for is that some of them, because of our lateral transfer language, some of them will be starting at the higher steps. So that's what that accounts for. And there are some appointments that will be heard later today in the council meeting. And then we reduced the 101 fund by 28,000. We did remove the 2 recreation line items for the spirit wall and the holiday decorations. So, but also, and you have the list in front of you of the list of items that were removed. So of these items, I know that it was suggested to add the roof replacement for these at the North Oregon Cemetery back in. And also there was a suggestion to add back in the recreation mini splits. So I wanted to give a little bit of an explanation on this. The mini splits, that was removed because I don't recall when the building was first built, but we've never had mini splits in there before. And why is that a necessity right now? And that was the question that we kind of batted back and forth. So that was an item that we felt that we could remove. Again, this is why we have these discussions, so we can decide whether or not we want to add them back in. And the roof replacement, I'll just say in discussions with Keith, now we do meet with the department heads at least twice, sometimes 3 times before the budget is finalized. And the roof replacement was removed at that time because we felt that we could get an extended year on the roof, but there wasn't enough information on whether or not full roof needed to be replaced or not. So there was a little more information we needed. But we could see having that line item put back in, and then if we don't need to spend it all, then that money just goes right back into the general fund where it came from, or the originating fund. So other than that, if you have the list in front of you, I don't know if we just want to start there. I can pause there and we can have a discussion about this list.
We can discuss the list. One thing I wanted to stress before we get started into this, even though we talk and potentially pass this budget tonight, any expenditure over $25,000 still has to come before council and get approved for expenditure at the time that the department wants to spend that money, those monies. So anytime during the year, if we as a council wants to review or remove something, we have the ability to remove that during the course of the year. And we can either vote it down when it comes to council, or when it's being presented to the president of council at the time, they can ask for it to be pulled from any particular meeting. So that's the president of council has that authority where they can direct an item to be removed from the agenda. So just because it's in our budget book and we potentially pass this budget tonight, doesn't mean the dollars are spent. We still have to approve the expenditures as we move throughout the year. I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. To the community, not council members, we know that, but I wanted the community to understand that. Thank you.
Great point, and thank you. And so if I could continue on while you're looking at this list of items, if we want to discuss any of these any further, I did want to point out that we had a member from the public come to the meeting last week, and Christine Gladio, and she did send a spreadsheet over. Now, it was at around 3 o'clock this afternoon, so we don't have a response for each individual line item right at this very second. But we are circulating it to all of the department heads to take a look at it, just to double check it. But I did also send a real quick, just bullet points explanation to address a lot of the items that were brought up as a part of that document. So, but I did want to point out that today we do have only 5 members of city council at tonight's meeting, which means that any ordinance that passes must pass 5-0 to pass under emergency. If the budget doesn't pass as 5-0, then essentially it has to wait 30 days, which wouldn't be until January 17th when it takes effect. So essentially, if it doesn't pass 5-0, there's no operating budget for the first 2 weeks of the year. So I did not realize that Councilman Drake wasn't going to be here. I knew Councilman Horniak wasn't going to be here. But in the meantime, if it doesn't pass, or if it passes 4-1, we can continue to have budget hearings until we have an amendment, and then potentially pass it as an emergency, so that we do have an operating budget and can start at the beginning of the year. But as you mentioned, the budget is a living document, so we use this as our document to go by, but changes can be made to it at any point in time during the year. So if there are any questions that anybody has on the budget, please ask. And that's not just after this meeting or during this meeting, but after this meeting as well. If there's anything that's pointed out throughout the year, ask us. Staff is always available to give any kind of an explanation, or just any kind of an explanation. I know some of the things that were highlighted in that document had to do with like postage, and why do we budget so much? And that's why I put in here that, and I said at the very beginning, the very first budget presentation, that we budget our expenditures high, we budget our revenues low, so that in the end we hope that that they balance out at the end of the year. We do the prior year's balance to help balance the budget for the following year. So whatever isn't spent does go back into the originating fund and gets used in the following year's budget. So that's something that Nick and I we meet very early, usually in July, August timeframe, with department heads to kind of gauge where we're at, or where we're going to be at the end of the year in each department's budget. Because if we start seeing anomalies, if we can catch them early, then we can kind of get that spending under control if there is something. But I mean, we haven't seen it since the 2 years I've been here. We haven't seen any real big anomalies. The only expenditures that we've had have been appropriated by city council. So that's something that comes up from time to time. We have our supplemental appropriations throughout the year. So it is a living document. At the end of the day, it's a living document, and can be changed at any point in time during the year. This wouldn't be a final passage, and that's it. We'll be looking at this throughout the year as we do internally, but city council, you always have reserve the right to continue to question what's in the budget and ask questions. So just wanted to point that out.
Mr. Mazer?
Yep.
Mr. Roman has a comment. Roman?
Just in general, I did see the email from the resident, and I think one of the things that the person points out in questions, they're looking at what's appropriated in the 24 budget because you don't have actual numbers yet, okay? You have, and then also what's being asked for in this budget in the 25. And then you're comparing it to 23 and 22 actuals. And what I'm saying is we always spend less than what we actually budget for. And I remember a year ago when we were doing the water rate increases, it was hard to get a handle on chemical costs because Doug Wagner, our superintendent, would always put in these, huge dollar amounts for chemicals. And I'd always ask him, I said, is this just based on inflation? Why, we always spend less than what we budget. He goes, well, Paul, you never know when there's a bad year. You can have lake water that's in poor condition. You're going to spend more chemicals. I can't budget, you got to budget for the worst case scenario. So yeah, a lot of our budget numbers are high because you don't know what to expect. But almost every year we spend less than what we budget. And I think too, a lot of the questions that the resident had was on salary. And it was very repetitive, why 4%, why this 6%? And, a lot of that has already been decided by council. We've had our contract negotiations, they're all done in good faith. We've had public meetings, ordinances, all covering that. In a way, we've already decided on what the 25, 26, and 27 wages are. So a lot of those questions are answered in that in general. And then a lot of the questions were just, what does this item represent? So whatever she's looking at, she's not looking at the detailed description that's in the budget, I don't think, because if she did, the answers were there. So doesn't mean we can't answer the questions, but I'm just saying there's a lot of things that I think are clearly in the budget to follow up on her response or her questions.
And Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Mazer.
some of them are budgeted a little high. A lot of the line items might be a little high, and it shows that we don't spend as much. And that's so that the department heads don't have to keep coming into city council for additional appropriations every single time they go over budget on postage or something, you know what I mean? And that's really why we budget enough for the need, whatever's not spent for that line item. And I use postage as the example because postage did go up this year. I mean, the cost of sending out letters and mailers and things is going up. I can't remember what the cost of a stamp is today, but it's up. It's up from the 40 cents that was of yesteryear. But what I'm getting at is, we budget a little higher because you just don't know how much advertising we're going to do or how much postage we're going to need or whatever it is. And so that each department head doesn't have to keep coming to council for additional appropriations every time they go over on a line item. So, and that's the difference of, one of the differences of government accounting is that, the appropriations have to go through city council. And there's no way around it. So city council has to approve of those. But that's all I have. So.
Thank you. Mr. Roman?
Just looking at Keith Henniger too, every year we put in for salt. We didn't use much salt last year. And you could say, well, you don't need to purchase anymore. We're going to get another year just like last year. Well, you don't know that. You don't know that. So you got to budget for it. I'm just saying.
Thank you. Mr. Mazer, do you have anything? Well, at this time, let me ask council. Council, do you have any questions for the administration at this time before he goes further with his presentation today?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Reeves.
Mr. Mazer, I know that you, I was the one that brought up the rec concession mini splits. It's not only for the concession part, it's for the restrooms as well. My question is that, I know it's snow, snow has to be there, but is the sledding hill available once it starts snowing? Or once we get snow? I mean, is it set for our citizens to use?
It is.
Okay. With that being said, what kind of, and I know it's snow driven, what kind of restroom facilities are we going to have for maybe a little kid coming in That's why, I think you understand what I'm asking. That's why I said I wanted to see if we could get the mini splits. And I believe when Mr. Borton was here, he had talked about, we have some from the old concession stand that we were gonna try to use. I don't think that would make it, I mean, and I know we got the 25,000, but I believe that was for new ones. Are we able to retrofit those over to the other restroom concession stand? So that's usable when we have citizens here that are gonna use the sledding hill during the winter. I know the summertime, it's probably not that big of a deal when when the pickleball and all that's going on, and plus all the games and that stuff. But we got beautiful facility with the two of them. We should just be protecting it, in my opinion. And like I said, can we get the old ones retrofitted? Then it wouldn't be as much as 25, it'd just be the labor, because we already have the parts in that, correct?
That's correct.
So, is that correct for everything I asked? I mean, that are we gonna try to get those retrofitted as soon as possible, or are we gonna wait until the spring to get it done?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Reeves, I don't have an answer on the timing of that, but I think that, yes, the plan was to retrofit the old ones into the into the building. That's the existing building. So yes, I think that, I think it's I think it's worthy of putting back into the budget, and whatever we don't spend, again, goes right back into
Right.
the originating fund.
Well, we wouldn't have to, budget so much money either, correct?
And Mr. Chair, I would say, this is my opinion, if you're gonna put it back in at the 25,000, and whatever's, we'll move forward with retrofitting. And if, hopefully, in hopes that it works, if it does, we'll come in under budget.
I would say based
And
on
then
the
it goes
change
back.
order with the press box and so what we did out back, it's probably gonna be more than $25,000. With the electrical and everything, so it's not as easy as just, oh, it's gonna be less than or more, or it's gonna be 25. We don't know what the cost is gonna be.
Yeah, I think, if I may, the thought was that we'll get started, get something in there. We'll have a 25,000. Staff felt that would be enough to have that work completed, have them retrofitted. We were planning on using the older ones and retrofitted to the building.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
can
Reeves.
we have that added back in to the budget, or how do we?
Council, what's your desires? Do you guys have any problem with budgeting that back in to see what that expense is as we move forward? Doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna spend it, but do you guys mind that if we add that $25,000 for the mini splits, which would heat the restrooms in the winter, cool the restrooms in the summertime?
I'm okay with that personally.
Council, you have any problem? Then let's add that back to the budget then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, is there anything else? We can turn it back over to Mr. Mazur if he has anything else that he wants to present to us.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
for now, I did want to touch on this roof replacement. I do think that, based on the comments, talking with Mr. Henninger, hopefully it's not $50,000. And again, this is another one of those line items. If we don't spend it all, it goes back to the originating fund. Since it was brought up before, is that something that council wants to add back in? We can get another year of life out of it, of the roof, or we can tackle it right now. That's kind of the toss up right now.
Mr. Chair.
I'll come right to you, Mr. Reeves. My personal opinion, if it is not to a point where it's detrimental to the structure, to the building itself, to the equipment that's inside the building, can we stretch another year out of it while we investigate what we really need? in speaking with you, there's some more investigative work that needs to be, and we could, either review it as we move forward or do it next year. I don't necessarily know if we have to add that $50,000 to the budget when we haven't even really investigated what the needs are.
Mr. Chair, sorry, if I could.
Yes.
And that's what me and Keith had talked about this a little bit more in depth too. There is a chance that we would need to do an emergency repair on it next year. My suggestion would be to wait, and then that would be something that would be over 25,000. So we would need an ordinance for it anyway. At that time, we could appropriate it if it's necessary. I don't believe we should be putting it back in the budget as of right now. Like we said, we were trying to cut these things out unless they were absolutely necessary. So my suggestion would be to leave it out. If we get to a point where we absolutely need to, we can come back with an ordinance next year. That is my suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was, like that song from Meatloaf. He took the words right out of my mouth. That's what I was gonna say.
All right, thank you. Ms. Ackerman, okay. Very good. Well, we'll leave the roof repair out of the budget then.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Roman, number one, had something that he wanted to discuss and bring forward to council. Mr. Roman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we've had discussions in our water distribution department. Mary Wolf is our water supervisor, and I can tell you her workload is probably the highest that position has seen in probably my 25 years here. It's just that there's a lot going on. Normally, we have the breaks and everything else, but even with the lead services and everything else that we have to do for the EPA, we're just at a high workload. Originally, Mary was looking for more maintenance workers, and I know we have a meter reader that when that person retires, will likely make that position a maintenance worker. We still have meter duties that they all perform, but again, it'd be nice to have another maintenance worker. But what Mary really needs is a backup as a supervisor. She has no backup. The people in that department will act as a crew leader, even though there is no crew leader position. We do try to pay for that, but they need another maintenance worker as well. So my ask, and this is something we have to negotiate with the union, is to create a working crew leader position where they can act as a supervisor, but can also do maintenance work. And the whole idea is to create 2 working crews. Right now, Mary's at like 1.5, and we do sometimes have to borrow individuals from other departments to get work done. Eventually, I think we can work towards that. We do have the revenues to fund it. I think it's something where we still would have to create the position, negotiate it with the union. It'd probably be a few months before we create it. We would, if we needed to do supplemental appropriation to cover the cost to the end of 25, we can do that at that time when we would have to go through council to create the position and set the pay as well. But I wanted to bring that up because it is a need. We do have revenue to cover that.
Mr. Roman, would that be paid for through water revenue funds?
It would be, and it would be covered, and which is whole. Our revenues are doing well, and I think it can handle that extra position.
Thank you. Councilor, any questions to Mr. Roman on that potential position that they bring forward? What's your timing of wanting to do something like that?
I know in the past when we've done this, just simple negotiations take 4 to 5 months. I would hope to do it quicker than that, but I would say in the next 4 to 5 months is we would try to create it and bring it in.
So second quarter of next year.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Major and Mayor, you have anything further for council at this time?
I believe not.
Okay. Mr. Major, you good?
I'm good. I don't have
All right.
anything further.
Council, do you have any questions for the administration at this time? Hearing no questions. Bradley, you want to come forward, state your name and address for the record. We did have one person that would like to speak before council today during the finance committee meeting. Bradley?
Yes, hello. My name is Bradley Henning. I'm the resident of 4262 Morning Dove Drive. And I was most recently, I served as the executive director of the Oregon Economic Development Foundation before being asked to resign. This is a statement where I'm strongly recommending that no further funding be allocated to the OEDF operations uh, until these matters that I'm going to speak to here are reconciled. During my time as executive director, I found the OEDF to be negligent in the following ways. It was not able to properly account for its use of public funds. It did not operate according to its bylaws. It did not have proper participation by its representative bodies, that being the executive board and the board of trustees. Here I have a letter that was addressed to me on September 17th as the executive director when I held that role, and it's a matter of public record. It was written by Director of Finance Nick Roman and sent to me by City Administrator Joe Mazer, and it reads as follows. Dear Mr. Henning, the city has been notified of several land sales made by the Oregon Economic Development Foundation and is requesting those funds be returned to the city. Per ordinance 004-2019, the city provided $1,700,000 to the foundation for the purpose of acquiring additional land for development in Oregon Town Center. Additionally, the city transferred parcel 4415514 per ordinance 058-2023 to be sold by OEDF. The foundation agreed to return any proceeds from the sale of that property less any expense necessary for holding and maintaining the land prior to the sale. The proceeds from the below transactions are requested, less the expenses in relation to these parcels and the purchase of parcel 4410204. It states the sale at $1,490,000, and it lists over a dozen properties, individual parcels. Purchases made by the OEDF at $576,700. And the amount requested by the city total at that point was $913,300, close to $1 million. No unsubstantial amount for a local municipality. Thank you, Nick Roman. Following the receipt of this letter, and this is my justification for not appropriating any further funds. This letter and discussions with the mayor and city administrator, I provided the city with the amount of funds available in OEDF bank accounts. As the disparity between the funds available and those owed to the city were of such a great amount, upward of several hundreds of thousands of dollars, it was stated to me that this discrepancy was making people nervous, I believe you said, Mr. Mayor, and could constitute illegality, that people could go to jail for this. Those are the exact words. And further requests were made for the city to review the OEDF's financial records. In my effort to hold the OEDF board accountable and establish meetings to reconcile the funding through working with the treasurer and other OEDF board members, I was repeatedly told that we needed to include the former executive director and that, quote, maybe he would know. This is not a sustainable practice for maintaining continuity within an organization responsible for receiving and spending public funds. As weeks passed without proper action, and I was continuing to be asked to execute further transactions of over $200,000 and pay vendor invoices that were totaling over $100,000, both of which would have left our accounts close to empty from my vantage point at the OEDF. I further requested that meetings be scheduled with both the OEDF and city officials present. On the day I was asked to resign and relieved of my duties as executive director, I had spoken with OEDF board members, the mayor, and city administrator, again insisting on such a meeting. Only hours prior to those conversations, I had spoken with Councilperson Ackerman, and to my surprise, been told that she had no knowledge of the letter detailing the $913,000 that was owed to the city by OEDF. As a member of the City Council Economic Development Committee, her being one of the city members that OEDF bylaws constitute as having a right to be seated on the OEDF Board of Trustees, she was not made aware, nor had she been granted a position by legislative decision as stated in the bylaws. This fact further supports my previous statements of the OEDF not operating according to the documents that govern it. I'd like to thank you for listening to my statement, and I'm making myself available to assisting any further investigation or audit that might occur into the OEDF as it's warranted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henning. The administration, council, do you have any comments to what Mr. Henning had said at this point in time?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Mazer.
We did, Nick and I discussed sending that letter to Mr. Henning when he first started. We didn't have the financial statements from the OEDF at that time. To my knowledge, Nick, we don't have anything from them at this time either, so.
Correct. I spoke with Mr. Pedro on Friday. He had said that their CPA had almost finished the financial statements and that they should have them in his hands the next couple of days. I have heard that already once, so I'm hoping that in these coming days, I will receive that. And I've talked with a couple of council members about that, and I've said I will share it with everybody as soon as I get it. It is something that we've been waiting on. And we have not released any funds for operating for this year until we receive those documents and that we approve of where they're at.
Thank you, Mr. Roman.
If I may, just give a little history on that too. So when I started, I did review the OEDF contract that the city enters into with them every year. I did make significant modifications to it because what was in the original contract wasn't what the OEDF did. So I made some significant changes to it. City council did pass it. We did come to an agreement. That was when Alec was there met with him and Tim Pedro at the time. The contract was modified to fit what they actually do. One of them is that they provide the financial statement. Since then, as Mr. Roman mentioned, we did not remit payment of $100,000 to the OEDF as of this year, as of yet, because we have not received that financial statement of the prior year. So,
And moving forward, those funds will not be allocated to them or presented to them until we are in good standing and feel that we have received the information that has been asked for.
that is correct. So that addresses the $100,000 in the operating. As for the remainder, there have been some expenses, as Mr. Henning alluded to. When the properties, the city, my understanding, Oregon appropriated funds. The OEF used those funds to acquire properties, both in the industrial park and at the town center. And the sale of those properties take place, that there's some type of mechanism for either repayment or usage of those funds. And some of them are holding costs. So if they do have to pay taxes on properties, they do have to. We did environmental work, say like at the brewery, that was through at the old fire station, that was through the OEDF. There were some expenses there. So there are expenses, ongoing expenses. But also the Cone property was purchased out of those funds as well. So that was an expense. And also we had some, considerable amount, I'd say, to some extent, for some of the other appraisal work and things like that, with getting options on properties around the industrial park to attract an end user, which, at this point, the one end user did fall through, the other one has come forward. So it's not like, we did capture the options on the properties that are needed for that site. That corner is needed for them. So, there are some expenses, and that's what we're trying to sort out right now with the OEDF. And hopefully when we get the financial statements, we get more clarity. I know that some of the other lots at the town center did sell as well. So we're trying to track down where the fund balances are. And then, as part of the budget of last year or this year, we were expecting a revenue from some of those land sales. So That's
Well,
what we're trying to
moving
chase down.
forward, I know Councilman Horniak is the head of the Economic Development Committee. Therefore, please direct and keep him apprised on where we stand as we move forward on this. And then Mr. Horniak should be providing that information to his Economic Development Committee. So therefore, please keep council informed as we proceed over the next couple months.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Yes,
just like to
Mayor.
follow up on that a little bit. And we will hold the Economic Development Foundation accountable to those numbers, and they should balance. And I had told Brad prior, if they don't or something comes up missing, they are prosecutable offenses. I did find out, however, some of the things that we did in acquiring property options were quite a bit more expensive than I thought. And so expenses are coming forward. I hope they are able to come up with it, but we'll make them answer to it. And we will hold them to it, and it'll balance one way or another.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Chair,
Yes.
that letter and going through this whole process was us holding them accountable and holding them to the fire. So it was us being proactive on this and not just sitting and waiting for them to come up with, holding the funds or anything else. We were being proactive in that approach. So that was, thanks for pointing that out. That's exactly what we were trying to do in our efforts of sending the letters and making these types of contact with people, is us being proactive and chasing that down.
Mr. Henning.
Yeah, and so one other statement I'd like to make to that, and it's because I didn't want to make this about me, but it is personal and it also has to do with professionalism, is that these things wouldn't been brought to light or to council in a way that exposes pierces the veil, so to speak, of the OEDF, unless I wasn't fired summarily without give it any reason. So with that, any other economic development director or executive director of OEDF, how are they to do their job within a organization where to hold their board accountable and act in the best interest of the city is to put them at a liability for their position and to be fired immediately and only told after I was fired that day and said that it was just because they were going in another direction. And Mary Gregory can attest that, because I asked him, Peter, directly with her present, why was I let go? It was conveniently on the same day that I started to discuss these issues with members of the city. If I'm not given any reason, what is one led to believe, and how can they be held accountable if they're not operating according to previous agreements with the city on multiple levels? That's not a reputable practice where organizations be transferring public funds to. I don't see how anyone else could argue otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Henning. Council, is there any questions that you guys have at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Mrs. Ackerman.
the day that the first time I ever spoke to Mr. Henning, I had gone to drop something off for Cookies with Santa to Jen Kurtovic, who was not in the office. And it was just a coincidence that he was in the office and that I spoke with him. Well, when I got onto council, one of the issues that citizens, and I think several of you would agree, a lot of citizens have a concern about, we as council vote time and again to send over millions of dollars over to the OEDF for the purchase of property. And many citizens will ask, where did it go? Who controls it after it leaves and goes to the OEDF? Does it come back to the city? What's the flow and under what circumstances? Does it roll over and do they just continue to purchase with it? So, but based on the well over $10 million that council has given to all these properties that are all over the city, that made me ask questions of Mr. Henning, who a couple hours after I spoke with him was asked to resign. He didn't, they fired him. But he asked a simple thing, and on behalf of the citizens and of all the tax dollars that are out there under the OEDF's care, can anybody here tell me to what state entity OEDF is responsible to report to on a yearly basis?
I would ask the administration to answer that.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Ackerman. They are private, considered a private entity, but they are also a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So there's whatever filings that they have to file as a, a business entity or a nonprofit entity, they file with the state. So it would be like the Secretary of State if they have to file anything. But other than that, we don't have general dealings with their day-to-day operations of what's required of them. I know that they do serve as our housing officer for the TIRC for any kind of like tax abatements and things like that. That's through the county. But that's part of their role. But as for filing with the state or anybody else, I at this time I can't. I don't have a good answer for you on exactly what they file into whom, but.
But they, and also, excuse me, they are to file with the city of Oregon on a yearly basis, though, correct? The financial.
Yeah, the
statements
financial
are-
statement,
okay.
in order, that's what we're waiting for, and that's why we haven't remitted payment to them.
Have they done it successfully in previous years?
As far as I know, I don't know exactly what they've submitted in prior years, but Mr. Roman?
It's all been based off of our agreement in that given year. So between 2014, I believe, and 2017, I was able to find those financial statements. In 2018, the way we gave money to them, where they had their executive director position changed, and we had that position here. So there is no longer an exchange of funds for the operating side because the director was here at the city and we were paying them. So there wasn't an agreement in place between 18 and 22. I might be off on the years a little bit. But so the first time that we had it in the agreement that they would need to provide those financial statements to us was for year 22. And that's one of the 2 years that we are currently trying to get. And we have not received those now.
Thank you. I do appreciate that you reached out and asked them directly to be accountable for those funds on behalf of the city. That is appreciated. Because I have been asked, and I know Steve's heard it, and probably some of you have, but there's still a lot of mystery surrounding what is OEDF and all these parcels of land and this money going out by, $1 million plus at a time, and, with the accountability that's attached to it. So any kind of, revelation on how that operates is appreciated by myself and I'm sure by taxpayers.
Thank you, Mr. Macer.
Mr. Chair. if I
Yes,
may.
Mr. Macer.
Just one of the items I wanted to point out is, I was pretty clear. We had discussions internally about, how to handle the Jolin property. And that was, I was pretty adamant that that needs to be in the city's name. And we all were, because, it was, everything was in the OEDF name. And if you saw the last weekly update, we're planning on transferring all those properties back into the city's name.
Oh.
Which actually makes sense. I mean, it really does if, depending on how the property taxes are handled, there's no reason for them to hold properties for a long period of time. It's just, to me, it just seems like an added expense that can be avoided. So, and I think at the time it was, I think there were more prospects of, getting industrial development as time goes by. It gets longer and longer. You wind up paying more property taxes in the long run. So it does make more sense for us to get all the properties back into the city's name. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. And can the people, just the last thing can the people, the three parties, I believe it's you, Mr. Sfarian, and Mr. Horniak, that are supposed to be seated, are part of the board, is that correct, of OEDF according to their bylaws? Is
That's
that
not
where-
correct.
That's not correct?
my understanding is that there's one city appointment for the board. So out of 5 board members.
Well, I took that off of their website. That's the only reason I asked.
That's-
But that, yeah, that we have, I know Mr. Horniak expressed that he really wasn't involved in the hiring process with Mr. Henning. But I feel like if there are gonna be tax dollars attached to it, that the city definitely have a say about the hiring and firing of individuals.
It'll be, just shoot it to you straight that it's really, what it comes down to is organization. And I think for years, for some time, especially when the position changes, that new people coming in, they organize the files differently, and you lose some of that institutional knowledge and where the files are actually at. So I think it's just a matter of them being more organized. I'm not saying that certainly not saying that there's anything nefarious going on, or why aren't they submitting their financial statements. I think it's more a lack of organization on their part. to
Just,
be able
just to make a statement real quick,
it-
Joel. Yeah, I agree. It does have to do with organization. I'm going to make the statement because I wasn't afforded the opportunity upon asking. I sent numerous emails to the 3, you were involved, Mr. Mayor was involved, the 3 members of the Economic Development Committee, as well as the OEDF board, asking for an interview because it is poorly organized. And there is no reason why an institution that's responsible for public funds, that it should just be left to, well, I guess they don't organize their files correctly. No, there's a structural organization that could take place, and that's a responsibility of the city. There is, within the Ohio Revised Code, an ability to create community improvement corporations. Other communities, they have these things, and they don't have these same kind of loose problems with some foundation that just expects this continuity to be handed off and based on individuals and to rely on them later on. I wasn't even afforded the respect, or was the public in having its funds being managed by this loose organization, to give me an exit interview to speak to these complexities as to what the problems are and how they can be resolved for the sake of continuing transactions for multi-million-dollar deals that are currently on the table, such as the data center. That respect was not even given to me. The only person that responded to me was Beth Ackerman. No one from the board did. No one from the administration did. They just left silent. That's no way to ethically resolve that issue. To treat someone like their persona non grata, a citizen who will speak further to this issue at many different other meetings, but also for the sake of organization and management, was not a sustainable way to act, and it was a non-action. And it showed the respect for these public funds through that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Henning, thank you again for coming in and kind of explaining what happened. A lot of us were kind of left in the dark of what happened, but that's fine. I trust the administration is going to move forward, and we're going to try to hold them accountable. And I'm sure you'll be present. I mean, you've been making yourself present here over the last couple of weeks, couple months, and I'm assuming that you'll continue that. So, we'll make sure the administration holds them accountable. Thank you. Council, if you do not have anything further for the administration, we can
Mr.
look
Chair.
to,
If I could.
yeah, Mr. Roman.
Just in regards to Mrs. Gladio's email, there were some questions that were pointed out on budget items that she questioned, and I think they were good questions. I think we have good answers for them. And I just want to remind council that you can come to me at any time, ask about any item, and we can talk about it, explain it. And going forward, even into next year, if somebody's going through line by line, you can point things out and we can bring it to council and we can do a reduction, remove items from the budget. That is something that we can do. So I just wanted to say that I appreciated her email. I thought there were some good questions. Like I said, I think everything is very easily answerable, but if there is anything that you guys are able to look through the next couple of weeks, the next 6 months, whatever, something that sticks out that you don't believe we should be spending money on, you can come back to us and ask for us to have that removed. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. With that, if there's nothing further from City Council or the administration, we'll close the meeting, the Finance Committee meeting. We'll close the meeting at 7:55. And then we'll have roughly 5 minutes before our 6:55. I have public school education.
You're still living in the digital world.
I need a digital clock.
Yes.
So we'll close meeting at 6:53, and then we'll start our regular meeting of council here at 7 o'clock. Thank you.